Welcome back. I hope you are feeling refreshed and are ready to continue with the last set of questions, which are application-based questions related to the human reproductive system. Okay, here we have a diagram of the male reproductive system, and the instruction says, study the diagram of the male reproductive system. Explain how parts labeled A, B, C, and D perform their function. We are not going to mention how they are structurally adapted to perform their function, but we are going to give their functions. So A, we have a duct there. We can see it is leading from the testes. It is called the vas deferens. It is a duct that allows sperm to travel from the epididymis, which is there, down to the sperm duct to the urethra. So that is the pathway of the vas deferens. It meets with the urethra there, and then ejaculation happens. Then B is the urethra. It is a duct that transports both urine and semen to the outside of the body. Just like I have mentioned in the previous question, sperm in the semen will travel through that duct called the sperm duct or the vas deferens, and they'll meet there in the urethra and are transported outside of the body. And then C points to the external male organ that is part of the male reproductive system, and that is the penis. This fills with blood to stand erect so that it can place sperm in the vagina. So that function is to place a sperm in the vagina during reproduction and during sexual intercourse. And then the last structure is D, which is the scrotum. This is a sac-like structure that holds the testes away from the body to regulate temperature. So the function of the scrotum is to regulate temperature. Then moving on to the next question, the instruction says, create a flow diagram to show the process of the reproductive system. So this refers to the many processes that we went through, and I also refer to them as the cycle or the life cycle of the human. There we got to see what happens when an egg cell is released into the fallopian tube, what happens when the sperm cell meets with the egg cell, and basically where the whole process of the egg cell being released starts. Okay, so our flow diagram will start with the process of copulation. We already know that copulation is another word for sexual intercourse. I'll just note it down there, also known as sexual intercourse. In your flow diagram, you can also add other explanations to help you remember the processes and to help you see how each process moves from one process into another process. So we know that in copulation, the penis stands upright, it is erect, it is inserted into the female's vagina, and their ejaculation will take place. It is the ejaculation of semen containing sperm. will be transported. Sperm will be ejaculated into the vagina, or will be deposited into the vagina. Okay. Then we look at ovulation. In order for, well, a baby to be born or fertilization to take place, the ovaries will release an egg cell, and that process is known as ovulation. And so we'll write egg cell is released, and we know which part of the female reproductive system the egg cell is released into. Egg cell is released into the fallopian tube. And then moving on to the next process. So here, there's menstruation and fertilization. We know that if the egg cell has not been fertilized or has not fused with the egg cell, menstruation will take place. But if the egg cell fuses with the sperm cell, then fertilization takes place. That is why there in that labeling, there's menstruation or fertilization, to help you remind you that if the one doesn't take place, then the other takes place. So menstruation, we know it is a shedding of the uterus lining. And I think that's why if you listen to some girls, you will hear them talk about how they are experiencing period pains. It is because a lining from the uterus is basically pulling, and that is what's seen as blood during the menstrual period. And then fertilization, we know that an egg cell fuses with a sperm cell. Okay, so once the egg cell and the sperm cell have fused, they form a zygote, and they will travel through the fallopian tubes. So through the fallopian tubes, we know that that's where fertilization takes place. And that's where cell division will start. Once the the fused egg cell and the sperm cell reach the uterus, they will implant themselves, basically burrow themselves into the uterus wall. We know that when this happens, it is because the embryo, this is where the part where the embryo is going to be receiving nutrients from the uterus wall, that is also known as the placenta, once this implantation has happened. So once the zygote has implanted itself on the uterus wall, cell division will continue to take place. As the cells divide, the divided cells will form an embryo. And then that embryo will also grow into a fetus. And then after 9 months, that is when the baby is going to be born. And then once the baby is born, they will grow. They will reach a stage of puberty where they also become sexually mature and are able to, well, in preparation for reproduction, and are later able to reproduce their offspring. So we then reach a stage of maturation where the mature couple has their offspring and their offspring has been able to produce their offspring. That is how we are able to see the life cycle of a human. Let us go to a quick ad break and we will be back to wrap up the lesson.